welcome to my YouTube channel where I discuss Dante's Inferno and reflect upon it. My name is Andy, and I am Engineer for God. So, today I'm going to talk about a very interesting topic, and kind of unusual one. And that topic is something known as limbo. Dante wakes up, and in case you didn't remember what happened for him before, Dante fainted after he got onto the boat to cross the river Acheron. So he wakes up with a clap of thunder, and Virgil leads him forward and brings him down into the first circle of hell. Now before now, we weren't in hell proper, but now we are. And I guess you would usually think that once you enter hell, it's going to be pretty scary, but actually not really. So Dante sees people there. Men, women, and children are gathering around, and they're not too bad off. I mean, they're not exactly happy, but they're not suffering in agony like you'd think they would in hell. Virgil has kind of a ghostly look on his face, and when Dante looks at him, he's thinking Virgil is afraid, and he says to Virgil, "How can you cure my fear if you are afraid yourself?" And Virgil says, "No, I'm actually not afraid. It's just that I empathize with these people here, because this is the circle of hell where I belong in." You see, none of these people sinned in life, but because they lived and died before Jesus came, there was no way they could get to heaven because they were not baptized. And when Dante hears this, he's really sad, because it's like there's so many good people. How can so many good people and virtuous people, not like the neutrals, not like the cowardly and the indifferent, these people actually did care and they lived good lives. So why are they here in hell? Just because they didn't get baptized, just because they weren't Christian, because there was no Christianity back then. How is that even fair? So Dante asks Virgil, but wait a second, there's got to be a way that virtuous people like this can make it out of here. I mean, through their own virtue, or even through someone else's. Like, isn't there a way to do it? And Virgil says, now that you mention it, there was this really awesome guy who came down here and rescued some of the people, like Adam, the first man, and Abel, his son, and Moses, and Abraham, and Jacob, and King David, all those righteous people. That great man came and rescued. And that man, of course, was Jesus. This was the first time anyone had been saved. Think about that. Before anyone alive on the earth was able to go to heaven, it was these people first that was rescued from the state of limbo. And yet, some of the people were left behind, like Virgil. And so, we don't know exactly why in the story these people were left behind in Virgil, but we'll keep going, and I'll get into that later. So Virgil introduces Dante to many amazing people that are there. So there's the poet Homer, who wrote the Odyssey, and a bunch of other poets that I don't really know as well because they're not as well known, but Ovid and Lucan and all those guys that wrote the great poetry. And also, Dante gets to go in this castle where he sees a bunch of other great people, like he sees the philosophers, Plato and Socrates, and he sees the geometer Euclid, and he even sees his favorite hero, Aeneas, whom Virgil wrote about. And so there's a lot of great people that are in this place. And Dante even puts a Muslim leader there the Saladin, who was a general who was fighting against the Crusaders, even though he was against the Crusaders, he was merciful to the people in the city of Jerusalem and gave them free passage. So he was honored as a noble knight, even by Christians. And so Dante honors him by putting him in limbo. And I'm sure that if Gandhi would have lived before Dante's time, he would have included Gandhi in limbo as well. So this is a place of honor, great non-Christians. So what exactly is this place? And is this even realistic? People that are caught in limbo because they died before Christ came, and yet some of the other people get to go to heaven. So why not these people? What makes the matter even more perplexing is that we find Cato of Utica in purgatory of all places. He's kind of the guardian of purgatory. And like Virgil, he died before Christ. He even committed suicide. But he didn't know that suicide was wrong, so I guess that's not really his fault. But why does a man like him get to be the guardian of purgatory and eventually go to heaven, whereas Virgil doesn't? So here's really the answer here. When Dante puts people in hell, or purgatory, or heaven for that matter, Dante isn't actually saying that in real life they're there. This is just for the sake of the story. And he's using allegory to illustrate his points. So a lot of people are going around saying, oh, Dante, he's so judgmental, he's putting all these specific people in hell that he knew in life, and some people he just despised, they knew about from history. How can he be so judgmental? Well, the thing is that Dante isn't really judging the people. He's using them as examples because of the things that they did in life. And for all we know, they may be in heaven or hell, and we don't know where they go. Only God does. So, with that in mind, don't judge Dante too harshly for putting people where he puts them. And also, in fact, Dante's version of limbo really isn't accurate to how the Catholic Church sees it. I mean, Dante is really just using this as a place to showcase all of his heroes. So therefore, they don't have to go in the lower portions of hell. These are great people, and they deserve to be praised, even though they weren't Christian. And so that's what Dante's doing here. So what exactly does the Catholic Church teach about limbo? Well, first of all, the belief in limbo is not actually a doctrine at all. It's more just a speculation. So originally, it was thought that, okay, so you have to be baptized in order to be saved. And if you're a Protestant, you believe that, some of you might believe that it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical baptism, and some of you do acknowledge it has to be a physical baptism. So, in the Catholic world, you do have to be baptized, like physically. And it does matter, the sacrament does matter, and we do accept Protestant baptisms, so we're not excluding that as long as it's done in the proper form. One thing I should also mention about the Catholic teaching on baptism is that besides ordinary baptism, which is actually physically being baptized by the water, there is also known as baptism by blood and baptism by desire. So if you're dying and you meant to be baptized, then it counts as you being baptized because you were planning on doing it, but you just are dying and it's just too late. So you're not going to get penalized for that because you desired to be baptized, so it counts as you being baptized. There's also by blood, so if you're like getting killed for the faith, but you haven't physically gotten baptized with water, then that also counts as a baptism. The Catholic Church is not being legalistic about baptism. So the question is, what happens to, say, an unborn baby that isn't baptized, that gets killed by abortion, say? So where does the soul of this child go? Before, some would speculate that because the child has original sin and hasn't gotten that washed away. Therefore, the child would have to go to hell. But that's so harsh. Like, this is just an innocent child who hasn't even gotten a chance to do anything wrong. How can this baby be put in hell? And so that's where the idea of limbo came about, because the people of the church wanted to see the best in someone who's innocent like that, through no fault of their own. So the idea of limbo, actually, in the Catholic view, isn't necessarily even in hell. It's kind of a state that's not heaven, and it's not hell, and it's not purgatory. It's just kind of floating in between those. It's a state of perfect, natural happiness, but without the fulfillment of God in heaven. So they're not suffering at all. They're completely happy, like as if think of it like a perfect earthly life without anything going wrong in it. That's kind of how it is. But in heaven, it's going to be much more magnificent than just living on earth. And so that's what the idea of limbo really is. And truly, there can't be any person that's not an infant left in limbo after Jesus came to rescue the people from Abraham's bosom, what's referred to as the state where Abraham and Noah and Adam and all those guys that were heroes in the Old Testament were held in a place because they couldn't go to heaven yet, because Jesus hadn't opened the gates and won the victory over sin. So they couldn't go to heaven because they still had original sin. But when Jesus came along, he rescued them. So then after that, no one would have been left in that limbo state. So either everyone else was in the real part of hell with his suffering, or they would be ending up in heaven, although they might have to stop through purgatory first. So the idea of limbo being held is only for infants or innocent people. Like, I guess you could apply it to mentally handicapped people that didn't know any better, could end up in limbo possibly. But now, it still seems kind of sad, like, that these people would still not be able to enjoy heaven. And so, at last the church was saying, maybe this is just a limitation of human reason, and by human reason, you have to be baptized in order to go to heaven, but God works outside the box sometimes. So God always has something up his sleeve, so there could be a way that these people could even get to heaven. And certainly I would think that Socrates would end up in heaven because he actually believed in one God, even though he didn't really know what the implications of that were. In fact, Socrates was actually put to death because he was corrupting the youth and teaching them things like the way that he thought about God, because anyone who believed in one God was called an atheist. So Socrates was actually accused of being an atheist, just like the early Christians were. So Socrates definitely, I would think, would end up in heaven. And I hope he does, because he's awesome. But yeah, we just really don't know. And the Catholic Church has not made an official statement on limbo or any of this stuff. This is just all speculation, and you can believe what you want regarding it. The Church also allows for the fact that people like you Protestants out there, we don't necessarily believe as Catholics that you're all going to hell because you're Protestant. We acknowledge that your baptism is legitimate, and also that even people who aren't Christian, it's possible for them to go to heaven because they didn't really reject Jesus because they didn't get to know him. So similar to the limbo people who are alive in the same situation where they just don't know about Christ and it's not even their fault, then it's possible they could go to heaven. And of course, the only way to heaven is through Jesus, but Jesus can even reach out to people like that in a different way. Like, one of the best illustrations I've seen in literature that shows this is C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle, which is the final book in the Narnia series. There's this Calormene, and the Calormenes are kind of like the pagan religion in the Narnia series. And he worshipped Tash, who is the false god. But the way that he treated Tash, he actually was worshipping Aslan, who was the representative of Jesus. So people who are not Christian, who are believing the same things as Christians, it is possible for them to be to heaven. Now, it's not advised that you stay a non-Christian. I'm definitely saying, like, you really need a map in order to make it through, and there's, like, no guarantee that you can go to heaven if you're not Christian. But nevertheless, the church allows that. It still could be possible, but yeah, you don't want to risk it and get baptized, okay? So I hope that was pretty informative. Really, the takeaway point is baptism is important. So if you're not baptized, I highly recommend you do it, because if you don't, you could end up going to hell. Really, I mean, that's serious business. And so if you're a Protestant and you just haven't gotten around to getting physically baptized, just humor me. You think it's just words and just a ceremony? I mean, it doesn't hurt to do it, right? Might as well. So I encourage you to get baptized. And if you're not a Christian, I would highly recommend you study and hopefully think about Christianity seriously, and think about all its claims and evaluate and discover that it's, according to Justin Martyr, Christianity is the truest philosophy. And so with that, stay safe, and whatever you do, stay out of hell, okay? Alright, goodbye.